Funny how things are, and then they aren't. This eschatological finality tinges everything. Like whispers in the wind, all will someday be lost. The light and warmth found in the hearts and minds of our neighbors may be snuffed out, or withdrawn and withheld for parties deemed more worthy. Even the paragon of the audiophilic gaze, the record, has an expiration date. The moment the needle touches down upon vinyl, in all its analog glory, the record experiences degradation. In this, the anointment, this paradigm of vinyl as a grail of music nirvana, becomes, or always has been, a flawed one. Each play wears down the record, the needle carving, scraping away through the prescribed grooves until the listener is left with nothing except nostalgia and the waning, unspoken understanding that what they have now is simultaneously and paradoxically less than and greater than the original. Perhaps the record, a resurging reliquary of bygone eras, is an odd choice for an analogy of the human relationship and spirit. But music has always had this power over life, an ability to inspire the soul, move the mind, and shake the body. So, in that regard, perhaps it is fitting that music's most revered physical medium may be an accurate simulacrum of our humanity. We can only synthesize what we understand, and if there's one thing that I do, it's music and the mystique of its vinyl medium. Whether it was being raised in a region that Rumene, in his piece, Where is Southern Literature? The Practice of Place in a Post-Southern Age, describes as being in a constant state of apocalypse, oblivion in perpetuity, or something in the water, eschatological undercurrents seeped into and permeated the lyrics and chords of the prolific, as well as the underappreciated artists and musicians. While the list is not exhaustive, the likes of Marvin Gaye, the Allman Brothers, Marshall Tucker, Aretha Franklin, Al Green, Bill Withers, Percy Sledge, Wilson Pickett, Sam Cooke, Buddy Guy, B.B. King, Patsy Cline, and Dolly Parton have long been established within the public listenership as producing some of the most influential and recognizable Southern music, and are a staple of who come to the immediate public mind when music and the ache of heart and isolation broaches themselves into discourse. If the aforementioned artists represent the past fertility of the oblivion of a heart, then the likes of the Oh Hellos, Lucy Dacus, Julian Baker, Alabama Shakes, Boy Genius, Gary Clark Jr., Leon Bridges, Maggie Rogers, the Tedeschi Trucks Band, Hannah Wickland, and St. Paul and the Broken Bones are indicative that a contemporary heart's pangs are just as reverberant today and necessary as they were in yesteryears. There will certainly be an observation made of the inclusion of Tom Petty in the anthology. The reason behind this is largely twofold. Petty's inclusion is an observation and a representation of the interstitiality of a great manner of today's relationships. As he existed in the past and the present, he is a manifestation of this otherness synonymous with interstitiality. Additionally, if this anthology functions as a quasi-letter and cathartic effort, then I get to make the rules. So, ha. And with his Wildflowers and All the Rest releasing posthumously in 2020, it becomes an especially poignant observation of the eschatology the region has now become synonymous with. I recently read a novel which stated a family narrative should start with love. If we, or rather, I'm to believe that, then heartbreak should begin with a breakup. Maybe breakup is not especially accurate. Seeing each other and then not? I don't know. If words can free us, then they can also bind us when our vocabulary is not sufficient in defining what was. Though, interstitiality is a word worth exploring, because if we define it as this otherness or in-betweenness, then perhaps the relationships unexplored and lost become this in-betweenness, simultaneously were and never was. This, in effect, mirrors much of the music that adorns this anthology, as there is as much said outside the lyrics as within them. And this happens in the chords. What is left unsaid, as important as what was, What was neglected as important as its inclusion? Gary Clark Jr.'s Please Come Home springs immediately to mind, as there's an entire story contained within the painful strokes of guitar strings, as Clark weaves an elaborate tapestry of heartache. My face was baked in a blue incandescence. The words, "Something doesn't feel right," branding the battered and beaten porcelain mask that had adorned my face for every encounter. It was an unusually warm day for February in Montana. And what about the Hollywood narratives of weather matching our present emotions? Bullshit. All fucking bullshit. Though, one hell of a magic trick to make us believe that the weather answers our beck and calls as our emotions ebb and flow. Wouldn't that be something? Instead, I was left to manufacture my own rain, running down and stopping periodically along my cheeks like ellipses on the page. But man, a fucking text. The phone quivered in my hand as I pulled to the side of the road, its weight something I at once craved, but needed to be rid of. Is there some sort of texting etiquette? If someone rescinds their interest in you via this electronic incandescence, are you obligated to reply in the same medium? Were you really playing with Moose, the long-discussed four-legged man of your affections? Or was the call ignored due to this breach of etiquette? I wish I could say that at that moment, I was mad. It always seemed easier to default to anger, and maybe if I had, I wouldn't be here, fingers clicking keys in the hopes of catharsis. But I've tried on anger, and found it unbecoming, unflattering, and ill-fitting. So, when I said, I'm not mad, and I fully respect your decision, it's not to pressure you into anything. For me, if things progress beyond texting, then they shouldn't end with a text. I was honest in totality. Sort of hard to walk into your folks' house after you've received that message, but having committed to spending a weekend with them, it was impossible not to. Even after spending an indeterminable amount of time within the cab of my pickup trying to gather myself, I made it all of 15 steps into the house before collapsing pitifully onto the floor, wishing that I would melt away. I mentioned Hollywood before, and will all but assuredly mention it again. But if this was a film, all I can say is Oscar-worthy. This isn't to frame it in the light of melodrama or artistic expression, but rather to acknowledge an acting coach or director having knowledge of this would undoubtedly tell and have me coax inspiration from the moment. For whatever reason, young love, lost love, unexplored love isn't held or viewed in the same regard as its thoroughly explored sibling, because for some arbitrary reason, it's been decided that longevity equates or is analogous to importance. But if we really peer through perceptions, slip past narratives, then we come to see and understand that so often these lost and unexplored loves are made of the purest and most concentrated stuff. I've often been easily overwhelmed by much of what life throws at me. You were, or rather are, no different. Living in this perpetual state of being overwhelmed has left me scarred with an unyielding sense of melancholy. Or I suppose, has this unyielding sense of melancholy left me perpetually overwhelmed and scarred? Quite the chicken or the egg conundrum I found myself in. Though constant teetering on the precipice of oblivion does interesting things to an individual. Though this isn't to say oblivion is an ever-expanding ocean, rather a sequence of little oblivions. Better oblivions, if you will. A rushing nesting doll set of oblivions, really. After you've fallen into one, there's still another left to plummet into. But this illusion, one that I immediately became fond of, because it assumes there is a core oblivion, an innermost layer that is the root of everything, like exploring an artist's discography, slowly finding yourself at their home recordings, seeing them at their most vulnerable and most intimate, a stripped down and bare essence of the self. It's interesting the things we remember. I can recall sitting in your car and everything we said seemingly important, but few of them left an indelible mark. Though I still remember the moment as a rosy and fuzzy feeling in the room. Car. Though, emerging from this nebulous moment, I can recall with great clarity. There was a break in the commingling of our laughter, and with bated breath, I turned to marvel in the radiance of your presence. Can I kiss you? I asked. And you wasted no time in your response. I've been waiting for you to. Again, our laughter began to coalesce, merge, and fuse within the shared space. And I can't imagine another way to share a first kiss. But after shared laughter, my hand gravitated towards you, and I felt my thumb graze your cheekbone. Though, even in this moment, I wasn't able to be fully present. I pulled back, and our lips hovered in close proximity. Did I need to see this to genuinely believe it? There is a temporal anomaly of sorts that occurs between kisses. Your eyes closed, mine open. Each breath extends for an eternity, though only seconds pass. Our lips reconnected until smiles crept upon both our faces. How do you feel about everything? I asked, and without further explanation, you knew exactly what I meant. Well, I think we can both see where this is going. You paused and gathered yourself faster than I ever could. And that really scares me. I haven't dated anyone in 4 years because the last person I was with really hurt me. My recollection does little service to the eloquence you displayed, every word perfectly placed. But what was most striking was your cynicism regarding love. I understand that love carries with it certain expectations. When those aren't met, or even more, are completely upended and redirected, it becomes hard to believe in its permanence. It simply is something fleeting, too ethereal for this world. Maybe that's what draws adults together. There's no longer the facade of perfection. Instead, it's two damaged individuals coming together, hoping their scars fit together like puzzle pieces. When they come together, healing can begin and memories finally explored. You showed me yours, but I never showed you mine. There was an admission of sadness and damage, but admission does little to expose the truth. And maybe this was the beginning of the something doesn't feel right. I suppose that somewhere along the line, I came to believe that by casting enough light, I can make people forget about what occurs in the shadows. And it worked for a time. But when you wanted to see why I am instead of who I am, this deception failed me and failed you. So, here it is. There's no cure for the imbalance within my brain. Just like there's no guarantee you would have accepted me for the way I am. But I know that by not telling you, it made it impossible for you to know me the way you needed to and wanted to. I've always been drawn to something famous Rita Hayworth said. Men go to bed with Gilda, but wake up with me. To line this more closely with the anthology this introduction prefaces, and to the conversations we had, you have Sinatra, I have Sam Cooke. So, I never wanted you to fall for the side A of a Sam Cooke album, only to flip it to side B, set the needle down, and find out it's me. Just me, off-key, and reeking of melancholy. My mind has long found itself incapable of escaping from the final lyric of Boy Genius's Souvenir. Do you hate what you see in me, like I do? That's an altogether unfair question to ask anyone, especially when my reticence has prevented anyone and everyone from ever truly knowing me. With this said, there is an acknowledgement that this anthology goes beyond that of catharsis and to the connection between music and life. For some, this connection extends beyond and is stronger than mere effect. For people like Marvin Gaye or Leon Bridges, a case could certainly be made that music is life, not just in the consumption of their life to make it, but also in a far more corporeal sense that for each and every artist listed in this paper's preamble, that there exists no life outside that of music. This then, by extension, yields a related question. What is music's capacity to foster life, or to disallow it, so far that it becomes a point of death? If the only music one listens to is that of heartbreak and sadness, then have they conditioned themselves to only find that in their lives? And if we believe heartbreak to be a little death, as it were, then has it disallowed the pursuit of life? For me, music has been my life, as I've always been too scared to open up my chest to the harsh realities of the world around me. I've lived my life vicariously through the lyrics of the artists I hold most dear. In this, an example is made of how life and music are illustrated of the extreme power music has over life. I've lost or gained countless time and memories with a needle upon vinyl, closed my eyes and experienced a kaleidoscope of experiences. The experience of others to the power of music may be altogether far less overwhelming, though none less significant. Because if music breathes something into us, then dedicating ourselves to it through composition, performance, the mere enjoyment of listening, or the accumulation of its recordings, then any of these bind us to this power. My head rested on a cool and gently frosted passenger window as we found our way back to my parked car following dinner and attendance at the local theater. "You have the loudest laugh," you said, and we both laughed. I think that's what I miss most about us, if I can even have the privilege of saying that. How our words and laughter sounded when they mixed in the space we shared. In those moments, we became thaumaturges of the human spirit, capable of lifting the heaviest and most forlorn souls. As we approached my car, our fingers intertwined, and words bounced between us. Our lips again met, and time slipped away, and soon we found ourselves intertwined. You reached out and attempted to find what lingered inside me when my barrier was most thin and permeable, and I recoiled. Did you feel this? Our bodies continued to mingle, our lips danced, and my hands began to explore beyond your face and grip. "Is this okay?" I asked. And while this, like asking for the kiss, was an observation of consent, it wasn't strictly an altruistic affair. The question was as much for me as it was for you. My levees were breaking, and you were rushing in. "I would tell you if it wasn't," you whispered as we became further acquainted with each other's bodies. You stopped and sat up. "If we go any further, we're going to have sex, and I'm not sure I'm ready to give that up yet." I took little time in responding. "That's fine. Those are your boundaries, and I respect them." Even in my expectation for the following response, I was totally and wholly unprepared. You looked at me, puzzled and perplexed. That's not what most guys would say. I had little to say, so I simply shrugged my shoulders. I could have, or should have, said that the night is perfect as it is. I thought in that moment that if we had, I would have fallen for you, and I wasn't prepared for that to happen. But I did regardless. Instead, I lifted your chin, which was laying on my shoulder, and simply said, "You're so beautiful." We sat there for an eternity. We sat there for a mere second. Your hand reached for my cheek, and I closed my eyes, basking in the warmth of your tender touch. You're so great. You seemed as surprised as I was that the words had escaped your mouth. We gave our last kiss, one as electric as the best of prose. And then we simply laid still for a while before opening the door and inviting the world back into our nights. As we stood there, in between our cars, we were between worlds, and in this, I became poignantly aware that we could become anything. We could be everything. But we, or rather I, would choose to be strangers. Did you sense it there too? Or was it in our last meeting, when I handed you the Lin-Manuel Miranda's book of poetry saying, regardless of where this goes, I hope you find me a pick-me-up in its pages. At some point, we all realize that love, or its precursors, can mean a great many things. It doesn't have to mean romance or lifelong companionship, children, meeting the parents, or taking pictures for the holidays. Love is lots of things, but sometimes it's simply a catalyst. Plops itself down in your lap, regardless of if you're ready, as a looking glass, as a mirror. When all have gone away, this looking glass is left as your lone companion. It begs for you to look past the sullen eyes of the man that has long since given up, to reach within and pull out the shriveling quintessence of us, and to leave it bare for curious minds to explore. I like to believe that relationships are like a rocket ship. They simply need enough fuel to escape the atmosphere. Both parties put in their share of fuel, and if they put in enough, then liftoff occurs and the ship breaches the atmosphere and the moment carries it forever. Sometimes life gets in the way and obstacles are placed. People die, parents move, old skeletons scare us away from the potential. But in that, the ship never leaves the atmosphere. It putters out or explodes in failure. We can hope for a relaunch, but the choice goes beyond that of the individual. I've long wanted for someone to look at me and say, "You're enough." To reach deep within me, take hold and say, This I can't live without. But I now realize that this is an action of two, a joint affair. One can't look or reach within the recesses of my being without first being allowed in. As the Oh Hellos beautifully opine, nothing lasts forever, and some things aren't meant to be. But you'll never find the answers until you set your old heart free. This all means that, unbeknownst to you, the words "something doesn't feel right" became the kindest I've ever received. They forced me to lay myself bare, peel back the layers, and yes, this is a Shrek illusion, and examine the inner machinations of my heart. While the distance between us grows, I've never been closer to myself. I'd long since held that I've always been good at loving others. But if I was unable to receive love, was I ever able or capable of loving another? A lot's been said, and I don't know if this will find you. If it does, I hope all is well, and thank you. A heart is a heavy burden, but it's one I'm now prepared to bear.